everyone, all the esteemed participants and respected our resource person. It is a great honor to me to introduce and welcome the resource person for the second session of this international workshop, who is really a resourceful in this field. She is our most respected Dr. Dipima Buragohain, Madam, Associate Professor from Jilin University, China. Her area of interest is language, typology, and research and leisure, known language, language documentation, language and technology, language teaching and learning methods and techniques, ESL, EFL studies, English for technical communication, business and professional communication, creative writing, instructional designing, e-learning, courseware development, so on. The madam has completed her PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University in 2011, and also MPhil. She did her MPhil from Jawaharlal Nehru University, and she did MA in linguistic from Jawaharlal Nehru University, and also completed MA in English from Delhi University. Madam has till date, she has awarded many awards, awarded Best Paper Award for the research paper entitled More Than Words International Students University Experience and Perceptions at the Silk Conference at Walek University, Thailand. Awarded Silver Medal in recognition of creative efforts to invent talking phonics for autism, see, touch, hear, speak, and also awarded special participation in recognition of creative efforts in invent talking phonics for autism, see, touch, hear, speak, and also awarded gold medal in recognition of creative efforts in invent talking phonics for autism, see, touch, hear, speak, and many more. She has published 4 books in her credit and published more than 30 research articles in different journals and national and international repute, and presented papers in conferences in different countries. She also organized many workshops, conferences, short-term courses, and seminars, and till date, 7 numbers of scholars have completed their PhD under her guidance. In research project, she did many research projects exploring a bygone era Thai Ahom manuscript, and a research project in association with Intact Delhi chapter, and a descriptive grammar of Thai Ahom PhD thesis, and negation and interrogation in Jaintia language, English querying lexicon, MA course project in computational language during 2002. She did have many academic courses, and she is associated with many learned association, and actually I do not want to take much time by explaining all these things. With this brief introductions, I'd like to, a very brief introduction, I'd like to welcome and invite Professor Dipima Buragohain, Madam from Jilin University, to deliver her speech on today's topic. May I request Dr. Dipima Buragohain, ma'am, please, over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. And very good evening to everyone. So without much ado, let's just start our discussion tonight, because I think we are already, I wouldn't say late, but yeah, it's on time. So let's start. Can you see my? Okay, wait.
Yes, ma'am. It is visible.
Okay, you can see this. Wait, let me. Why is it so slow? Wait. Okay. So the topic for this session is how to prepare a research article, as in how do we, in simple words, how do we write a research paper. So there are certain aspects that we need to take care of when we start writing a research paper. That's all we are going to discuss tonight. Let's start with what do we understand by research article, and why do we do it, and how do we do it. So in simple terms, as I said, I would just try to explain. Um, what is a research paper, or just forget the word paper. What is research basically? We do an investigation, we do a systematic study, we follow a certain structure and organization while working on a topic or a subject. And we do research, or we conduct research by identifying a problem, and then collecting the existing studies on that problem or around that problem, and then we collect data to explain to explain whatever we are going to research, and then we do an analysis of the data, and finally we come up with the conclusion or the results. So overall, that is what we do in research. Why do we need to do this? Because by doing so, we can identify issues, problems that can be solved by um, our own collection of existing literature over that around that topic, as well as using some methods, adapting and adopting some methods to find, to analyze that literature, and to explain and extend our own findings, and then finally come up with the conclusion. It's already written there, actually. I don't want to go through that. But overall, what we do is, or why we do this, is because we want to find or identify problems, and then we want to work on finding solutions to those problems. Why? Because it will facilitate our knowledge, it will enhance our knowledge while conducting these scientific inquiries. How do we do it? How do we conduct research? Of course, we do have a structure for that. But overall, what we do is we pick a topic, then we do we conduct research on it, as in we study on that topic, we try to find existing literature, we analyze that, review that, then we try to gather data around it. So we write that content, and then we organize it, revise it, and finally we publish it. So overall, this is what we do in simple words. But then when we talk about research article, when we say how to write a research article, now there we need to be sure of what kind of or what type of research article are we talking about. Now in my case, or in most cases, what we do is either we write a research paper, maybe in a journal, or we write a review paper or a review article. Now these two are different. How are they different? If we are talking about a research paper or a research article, that means we are talking about an original research, a primary source. And if we talk about writing a review paper or a review article, that means we are talking about secondary source, which means a research paper will be our work, our study, so it will be original research. If we talk about writing a review paper, it means we are actually not writing something on our own, not writing something original, but we are reviewing available research. So we are just reviewing available research, and of course we are, while reviewing, we are putting forward our own arguments, logical arguments towards it. But that is the basic difference between writing a research paper and writing a review paper. When we talk about research paper, of course, it will include a different structure than that in our review paper. How? In a research paper, the structure would include our own investigation on the topic with our own reasons, which would be a logical explanation, and it will be supported by data that we would collect and the data that we would analyze afterwards. And then finally we'll come to a conclusion. Whatever conclusion we find, that will be the end product of our investigation. So that is all we would include in a research paper. If you talk about the review paper, so how do we do it? We review the articles, and while saying review, we do not just say it is a good article or it is a bad article, but we have to provide some constructive criticism. That means if I don't find something good in that paper or in that article, then I have to give a logical reason. I have to give a valid reason why I find it not so good in that particular aspect. Or if I find something really good, I have to give a logical reason for why, what will support my argument. So basically my review will also need some sort of validity. I can't simply say this is good or this is bad. I need to give reasons. So supporting materials should be both in my research paper as well as in my review paper. And the last one is if we compare the length of a research paper and a review paper, a research paper will be relatively longer than a review paper. Usually, when we write a review paper, it is of 2 to 3 pages usually. But a research paper should be more than that. I mean, whenever we try to publish a review article or a research article, we usually we follow the guidelines of the journal where we are going to publish it or where we are going to send it for publication. So based on different journals or different publications and their requirements, we would write a research article, and we will decide the length of a research article as well as the length of a review article. So overall, when we talk about writing a research paper, not a review paper, but the research paper, we have to follow certain steps, basic steps. So number one, we need to find a research problem. Now, and then we have to do an extensive literature review. Now, why do we need to do an extensive literature review? What is the connection between the research problem and the review? The reason is I need to, number one, I have identified a research problem, which will be the main reason why I am going to write that paper. But then I also need to prove that the research problem is a valid problem. So to prove its validity, I need to do a thorough literature review. I need to go through the existing literature, the existing studies on that problem or around that problem, studies that address that problem either directly or indirectly. So there has to be some relation. So when we choose literature review or the studies under literature review, we need to make sure that all the studies that we choose or select for literature review, they have to be related to the problem. Then once we have the literature review done, then by then we sort of somehow know what kind of which way or which direction do we want to go through while continuing with our research. Now, these steps that I'm going to mention, these steps are important, equally important for writing a research paper as well as writing our thesis, PhD thesis. because even in thesis we have to follow the same points. And I'm sure that during these sessions, tonight's session and as well as the sessions afterwards, you might be noticing the same words, same terminologies, because this is all about research methodology. So of course the terms and the concepts would be similar. So we need to go through them again and again. So it's like a revisit, because even in research, whether it's a research paper or a thesis, in any kind of research, it is a cyclical process. So yes, we would be going through the same terms, terminologies, and concepts over and over again. So once we are done with our literature review in our research paper, then we would need to follow what direction we are going to go. As in, we need to identify what kind of research method or what kind of research design we are going to follow. Or if we are going to, work on this problem, how do we explain that research problem? So in the research design, we would be including the research problem itself, as well as the ROs, as in the research objectives. Maybe I would talk about that later. So right now, let's just go through the steps quickly. So I will prepare my research design or my research method. And once I'm done with that, then I would start collecting data. So my actual research, that would be my original research, would begin from this stage, when I start collecting data, or maybe a little before that, when I have a design, an outline of my research, a method of my research. Maybe from there on, I would start developing my original research. So I would collect data, and then once I collect data, I would have to interpret, analyze my data. I would do that. I would discuss the results then, and then I will prepare my entire paper. So basically, these are the basic steps that I need to follow when I write a research paper. So let's go one by one very quickly. Now, as I said, a research problem, it has to be valid. Now, how do I identify a research problem? Because if I don't have any research problem, then there's no research. It's as simple as that. So I need to have a research problem. Now, let's say before I start writing the paper, I have no idea what topic, or maybe I have decided a topic, but I have no idea how to start working on it. So in that case, I need to find the research problem. What kind of research problem can I see here? To know that, I need to do, first of all, uh, a survey of existing literature. Let's say I want to work on something like, let's say, the ongoing situation on COVID-19, something that has to do with COVID-19, and an aspect of it which is related to my field. So in that case, of course, I would not find any, maybe I will find some latest studies on COVID-19 and the topics around it. But maybe what I can do to start my literature review, to start identifying the existing literature, maybe what I can do is try to find research papers, articles, or thesis or other work on pandemic situation, pandemic outbreak. So maybe that would help me a lot in understand to find out what kind of problem I can have here, or what kind of issue I can be addressing in my paper. So in any case, my point is, I have to start first of all with my literature, existing literature. So I choose a topic first, and then, because I have the topic but I do not have the problem yet, so in order to find or identify a problem, I need to start reading literature, existing literature around that, or studies that address that topic directly or indirectly. So I would do that. Now, how do we do it these days? Because colleges and schools and everything is shut actually right now. So in that case, maybe I can start exploring the online repositories. digital repositories. So maybe I can start doing that. So, and I would collect existing literature on it. So Google Scholar is one of the most used and the common platforms where I can find valid, or let's say reliable sources, reliable secondary sources that I would call. So for me, Google Scholar will be the first one where I would go and try to find any studies related to my topic. And then when I start reading them, then it would help me find my research problem, because I will get the idea how to project. Maybe I know what is there, what kind of issue I want to focus on, but I don't know how to identify it, or how to consider it as a valid research problem. So in that case, I would do an extensive reading of existing literature, and that's how I would try to find, identify the research problem, and I would have an idea by then how to project my research problem. So it will be a statement, basically, problem statement. That is how we would refer to the problem in our research paper, whether it is a paper or in my thesis, we would do the same. So, so I would do that. And then because this problem is a valid problem and I need to prove that, that is why I would need to include only and only relevant literature or relevant studies uh, in that topic. Now, how do we do that? Again, if I go to Google Scholar, let's say I have found, I typed the topic that I intend to write, and I have found studies related to it, maybe. And then how do I choose? Because I would get thousands of pages, maybe thousands of links on Google Scholar. So how would I choose which ones do I need? Now, there are various ways to do that. One, maybe, I would see which one has more citations, because that's what we do. So when you go to Google Scholar and when you type, and when you search, and when you have that list, the search pages, it will show you the links, and then beneath every link there will be citation number given. So one way of finding the relevant literature is by looking at the highest number of citations. So which study or which book or which paper has got highest number of citations, maybe I would try to include that in my literature review. That is one. Second, I would also need to identify which ones are the recent ones, latest studies, as in, this is 2020. If I'm writing a book, or sorry, if I'm writing a paper, research paper in 2020, and I'm citing or referring to some sources, some article which was written in 1990, then it might be considered, or strongly considered, as obsolete data, outdated, because it is too old. So another way of including the relevant literature, existing literature in your literature review, is to find studies which are not older than 5 years from now. So that means if I'm writing a paper in 2020, I should be looking at literature, existing literature, which are not older than 2015, or maybe let's say 2014. If I quote something, or if I cite something before that, then it might be considered as irrelevant. Even though it is relevant to the topic, it might be considered as outdated. So I need to keep that in my mind while writing, because why I'm saying this, because when you write a paper, research paper, and submit it to, let's say, an international journal or an indexed journal, so in that case, these minute details are very important. So we need to take care of those things, because the editors, the reviewers really take note of those things. How do I say that? Because I myself have been a reviewer for a few journals for so long. So these are the things we need to take care of. So that's why I'm sharing that. So again, back to the screen, back to the slide. So when I write my problem statement or when I write my research problem, I need to make sure that I'm putting it and I am proving it as a valid research problem by referring to or citing the correct and relevant and most recent literature related to this. So I would do that. And once I have my research problem, so let's say I have identified my research problem in my paper. Now, how do I address it in my paper, in the rest of the paper, because I have just identified it. So I have put it in the introduction, maybe. Now, how do I explain it? How do I address it? The ways of addressing it are, I would say, two aspects I need to take care of. One is the research objectives. Second is the research questions. Now, it depends on what kind of research you are doing, because or what sort of research paper you are writing. Because sometimes, depending on the type of research I'm conducting, maybe I don't need to be so specific about my objectives or my research questions in a research paper. But if let's say, for example, I'm doing an exploratory research, in that case, maybe I am not so sure about what kind of objectives I am looking for or I'm trying to achieve. Or maybe I will not be very specific, but I can write maybe one or two sentences, but I'm not very specific maybe. But then again, in another case, let's say I'm writing quantitative research paper. So in that case, I have to be very specific, very clear about what kind of research problem I have, what kind of research objectives I set, and what kind of research questions I design. So these things are important depending on what type or what kind of research I am into. So now, how do I explain the research problem? I explain the research problem by dividing it by further dividing it into questions. So my research questions are actually elaboration of my research problem, and this is true in case of research paper as well as thesis. If I'm pursuing my PhD, even then it is true this way. And then, so research questions are the elaboration, and then the research objectives are actually the answers to my research questions. So if I have 3 research questions, I should ideally have 3 research objectives, because they are questions and answers. But since we are writing we are going to talk about how to write a research paper, so maybe I don't need to elaborate, or we don't need to focus that much on a research problem. But in any case, I still need to mention a research problem, whether I explain it in details or be very specific and precise. I still need to add it. I still need to include it in my research paper. Now, the most important part is literature review, whether it is my research paper or my PhD, let's say. Why do I need it? As I said, because I need to have validity of my work, as well as validity of my validity of my research questions, as well as the objectives. So that's why I need to do a literature review. And the kind of studies that I would include in my literature review will be, of course, number one, they have to be related to the topic, and they have to be the existing literature, the latest ones. Second, while reviewing them, I need to make a connection with the literature, with the study that I have picked, the selected study, and with either my research problem or my research objective or my research question, anything that I have written or I'm going to write in my work. So there has to be a direct relation. Otherwise, there's no point of including that paper in my literature review. Now, how do we review? Because we are saying this is literature review or existing literature. How do we review that? Now, there's a problem here, a common problem here, as I can see in most of my PhD students. They, when I ask them to write a literature review, what they do usually is they just describe. It sounds descriptive because they only include what, let's say, study X, paper X. So they would only include what this paper X is all about, and what was the research method it adopted, what kind of data it collected, what were the findings of it, and that's it. So if you include those things, of course, we need to include them. But if you include only those things, then where is the rationale for including that in your literature review? Because you do not have to describe, you have to analyze, you have to review it. So it means you have to establish a connection, a relation between that study and your own work. So is it related? Is that study related to your problem? Is that study related to your research, one of the research questions or one of the research objectives? Is it related to your research method, the method that you are going to adopt? Is it related to that? Or is it going to be related to the findings? Of course, you cannot say it right now, because once you are done with your data collection and interpretation, only then you can do that. So you have to keep coming back and forth, keep doing back and forth, because at the end of your research paper, maybe you would like to review your existing literature again, to see if you have included the right ones or not. So it's a cyclical process, even in writing a research paper as well as writing your thesis. Another reason for or purpose of doing a literature review, conducting a literature review, is to find if there is any research gap. Let's say you are going to include or adopt the same research method that the paper has adopted, and then maybe you have identified that there is one aspect which that paper did not address, but you are going to address. So in that case, this is a very good example of finding a research gap. Now, in terms of writing a research paper, maybe I don't need that much of a detailed study. But if I'm pursuing my PhD or research, in that case, I need to take care of that. So research gap, I need to keep that in mind. So when I do a literature review, when I conduct a literature review, I need to find that as well. If all the aspects that you are going to add are already addressed by it, that means you need to find something new, because if you keep doing the same thing, then there's no originality. So in that case, your work will be of no relevance. So you need to find something new in it, a new aspect which was not addressed, or maybe which was partially addressed, but you are going to address it completely in detail. So you need to take care of those things as well. The last point that I have mentioned here, formulate questions that stimulate further research. Now, in this case, let's say you have read a literature, you have read an existing study, a previous study, And now you have just summarized whatever points you found. Now, how do you analyze it? Or how do you critique it? How do you review it? You need to ask questions. Why, what, how? You need to ask questions to yourself while reading, going through the existing study to find out the answers. If the answers are there, that's well and good. If the answers are not there, that means you can put that question in your review that, these issues were not addressed by this paper or by this study. So that is also important, because by doing that, you are actually highlighting what were the issues, important issues that paper would have missed, or it had missed, and you would include if the topic is similar, or yeah, somewhat similar. So literature method review is very important, even in case of writing a research paper, because if I'm talking about pursuing PhD, then of course I have enough space, enough room for explaining the previous literature and explaining the rationales for why I have included those. But when we are talking about writing a research paper, the length is not that much. So in that case, within the limited space, I need to be sure that I have included all the relevant sources there with relevant and valid reasons and explanations. Now coming to research method. So meaning strategies or the processes that I adopt for two things. One, to collect data, and two, to analyze data. But then what kind of research methods can I actually adapt or adopt to write my research paper? It depends on a few things. One is the type of research. What kind of research or what type of research I'm going to do. Now, if we broadly divide them, broadly talk about research, it can be either qualitative or quantitative. These are the broader categories. So if I'm doing, let's say, a qualitative research, that means it will be non-numerical, and that means statistical data will not be there, and it will be, the data that I would collect will be unstructured. So how do I do that? Either by conducting interviews or having focus group. So I would do that. But if I'm doing a quantitative research, meaning I will have a lot of numerical data, which means it is a structured data. It can be survey or it can be experiments. So I would have to choose this first. So if I'm doing a qualitative research, that means my method for collecting data as well as analyzing data would be different than if I'm doing a quantitative research. Now I have put here open-ended questions and close-ended questions, because usually if I do qualitative research, I would put questions there which have questions which will have more explanations than just a single word answer. And if I'm doing quantitative data, then of course I would have close-ended questions, because there I would have, specific answers that I would expect from my participants. So this is there for, this is the basic difference between qualitative and quantitative. So again, I'm saying, depending on which type of research I'm doing, I would be choosing or selecting my research method. Another category would be the type of data that I want to collect. So depending on that, I would I would decide my research method. Now let's say observational. Let's say I just want to, I have a class, I have two classes, let's say, and I want to observe the behavior of my students with some particular parameters. So in that case, I would follow observational research method. So my choosing the method would be based on that. Or let's say I want to do an experimental research. Now, usually in in the field of humanities or social sciences, we mostly go for observational and experimental research, or let's say quality and qualitative research. We would go for that, but mostly. But if you talk about researchers from science or engineering background, they would go for simulation. They would do a real-time experiment or real-time simulation. So they would be testing, they would be measuring the operation, testing the operation through computation. So simulation would be totally different from the kind of research that we would do in humanities or social sciences. And the last one, derived. Now, derived will be something like, let's say I want to do a longitudinal study on something on, let's say, WhatsApp application. I have a text of, let's say, I have a huge data of text from, let's say, 1,000 users, and the data list will be huge. Now, my research will be based on, because that data is already existing. I'm not going to ask someone to create WhatsApp messages. That data is already there. What I want to do is I want to read the existing data and find new research with new conclusion to it. So that will be derived research method. So what I want to say is, based on these types of data that I want to look for, or based on the type of research that I want to work on, I would choose my research method. Now, again, these things are important because if I want to publish my article in an indexed journal, whether it is SCI or Scopus or SSCI or whatever indexed journal, if I want to put it there, then I have to be very precise, very specific on what research method I have included there. Why did I include it there? Because I need to give a valid reason for, I need to give a rationale for that. So I have to be very clear about what method I'm going to apply and what kind of research I am actually planning to conduct. So once that is done, that is decided, I would start my data collection. Now, while collecting my data, broadly there are two types, I would say. One is primary data collection and the other one is secondary data collection. So primary data can be, if I'm doing an experimental research, let's say action research, then I would go for this because the data is not there. I'm going to go and I'm going to have the data then and there. So let's say questionnaire. If I have the questionnaire, I will ask, let's say I'm conducting interviews, but the questionnaire, all the questions are my own. And then the answers that I would get would be given by my participant, which means this would be considered as a primary data because that data is not available anywhere else. Even in case of observational research, I would go observe, or I would ask, I would employ people to do that because in action research, usually these things occur. In terms of secondary data which is already available, that's what I'm going to collect. So basically, the literature that we collect for our literature review, that is secondary data. So we do library research or digital research or even official and non-official reports. So these are the data that broadly we need to look for. Either I'm collecting primary data or secondary. Usually we do both because of course for literature review we need to have secondary data. Oh, and before that, in terms of doing a qualitative and quantitative, these days the latest trend is to go for a mixed mode research, as in go for both quali and quanti. So because that helps a lot in a lot more ways, again depending on what kind of research you are doing and what kind of topic you have chosen. So based on that, we would select we would choose our research method. So for collecting data, we have different tools. Now for analyzing data, so collecting data, we just collect the data. Analyzing data, again, there's a difference between the word called description, data description, and then data analysis. So once we collect data, there are three aspects that we need to take care of. Once we collect data, then we have to describe it, explain it, and number three, we need to analyze it. So there's a difference between description of data and analysis of data. So in the description part, maybe we just summarize what we have found, which means what we would interpret the data. And analyzing, here we synthesize, as in here we would identify relationships between different aspects or between different variables that we're going to use. Identify and compare those, and then identify the differences or similarities between these aspects or these variables or the parameters. Okay. And so the analysis of data would help us predict the outcomes, the kind of outcomes that we are going to get, or outcomes here meaning the findings basically. So again, there is a common problem here that I see in a lot of research papers that I get for reviewing. In the discussion part, so we have introduction, we have literature review, we have research method, then discussion, and then conclusion maybe. So sometimes we divide the discussion part into data interpretation, data analysis, and findings. So then it would be very clear. But when we include everything in one, what happens is the description and the analysis, the writers are confused between these two, and this is what is transparent in their work. So that is why it would be very useful, relevant, if we divide them, if we separate them, keep them in two different sections: data description or discussion, and analysis, or let's say finding, or whatever you would like to call. But make sure that these two things are two different sections, then it would be easier for the reviewer to see that you have clearly mentioned, you have clearly described the data or interpret the data, and you have clearly analyzed the data, which will give you the findings or the results. Now, while doing this, we also need to make sure that while showing the relationships between different variables or between different aspects or parameters in the paper, we also need to make sure that while analyzing the data, we would show or identify relationships between the finding that I had with the findings of the previous studies. So here again, I have to go back to my literature review, because that connection has to be there even now. So I need to do that as well. Again, while writing the findings or analyzing the data, I need to make sure that I show the relationship between different variables in my analysis, as well as I need to show the relationship between my finding and the findings of previous studies, because only then my validity would be theorized, it would be proven, it would be strong. How do we do that? Of course, we explain that, and then apart from that discussion, we also use a lot of graphical presentations, as in graphical representations, meaning we would include tables, figures. So by showing the similarities or differences between our findings and the findings of previous studies, or between the variables, different variables or parameters that I have included. So the similarities or differences or any other relation that is very clear. So if I only write explanations, then I mean, which is okay, but then if I also include graphical representations, then it would be even clearer. So if I write a quantitative research paper, then of course there will be a lot of numerical data, which means there will be a lot of graphical representations, which is needed. But in terms of writing, let's say an exploratory research or a qualitative research, maybe I would not use that many figures or tables. But in that case also, if I include a few graphical representations, then things become very clear. So in terms of writing a quantitative paper, of course, I would include various tools. So I have just included SPSS here, which is very basic right now because everybody uses if you are writing a quantitative paper. Now, in my last two sessions, in my previous sessions, maybe you were not there, but I have talked a lot about my upcoming paper, which, as an example for a lot of things, I was writing a paper on sentiment analysis, and finally I have completed it, I have submitted it. So why I'm saying this, because there I have included tools like data mining tools actually, and tools for sentiment analysis. So there are different tools, that's what I mean to say. There are different tools for different kind of research. Again, if I'm not familiar with the tools, what I do is I just search online what kind of latest uh, tools people are using, research tools people are using. And I find ResearchGate very useful in this, because on ResearchGate, people, researchers all over the world, they share their ideas, they share their um, experiments and experiences with what kind of research tool they are using for what kind of research they are engaged in. So if I am not so sure about it, then I should look for information on something like ResearchGate, which is useful. Or maybe if there's something else you would if you would like to share, you can. Now, of course, I write conclusion where I just summarize everything, basically the main points or the highlights, and then I just restate my research problem. Synthesis basically. So I would summarize, and then I would add my own stance to it, the logical stance to it. And if I have any suggestion for future research, if I can see that there is a scope for future research in that topic, then I would give recommendations or suggestions. So usually I will put them in conclusion. Now the most important part is maybe structure of a research paper. Of course, I would include introduction. So usually what I write in introduction is background of the study. Now, sometimes, again, depending on the kind of topic you have chosen for your research paper, maybe you would like to add literature review under introduction, or keep it separate, depending on the topic that you have chosen or the kind of research that you have chosen to work on. Of course, I would include the problem, why I'm writing this paper, and then the ROs and the RQs I would include here, and then the literature review. These are the basic components, and this is similar to both research paper as well as a thesis. As in, because I'm from humanities, so I'm just sharing what we used to do or what we are familiar with. If you're from an engineering background, maybe your structure would be different, but these are the basic components that we need to include. So literature review, again, I would just include the existing literature around the topic that address the topic, as well as their review, critique. And then I would include the methodology. So the methodology part should include two different types of methods, whichever I have used for whichever. One is collecting data, whatever method I have used for collecting data, and number 2, whatever method I have used or I am going to use for analyzing the data. Now, in the method area, method section, I also need to talk about the sample of my data or the population or location. Let's say is my sample on, let's say, am I working on a group of students? How many students? What is the total strength of students? Or where is the location, as in, is it from a particular school, particular college, or particular university, wherever. So I need to talk about those in my method section. So in the results section, I would just illustrate my data. Now, as I said before, either I can include everything in under one heading, but then I have to make sure that whatever content I include under that heading, it is very clearly divided. So I need to make sure of that, or I can just give them different headings. So the analysis part I would include in discussion, where I would talk about the relations between the variables or the parameters that I have included in my research, as well as the relation between my finding and the findings of the previous, because I need to theorize why my uh, study or my topic is important, why my study research is important. I need to prove that here. And then conclusion, of course, I would just summarize the highlights as well as recommend or suggest for future research and references. So this is the basic structure that I need to include in our research paper. Now, the format. How do I include these things? Usually, if I want to submit it to a highly indexed, any journal actually, any reliable journal, what happens is I need to, and I should strictly follow the format, the guidelines that they have given. Because sometimes what happens is if the given guideline is not followed, people won't even read the paper. They will straightforward reject it. So we don't want that. That's why we should follow the guidelines very strictly. So for guidelines, usually for formatting, we have some familiar terms like a cover page. So even a cover letter. Sometimes they include the cover page. They say it is similar to the title page. So I forgot to add the term cover letter, because usually if you submit it to an international journal, they will ask you for a cover letter as well. So in the cover letter, what you have to do is you have to write to the editor. You have to include what is your topic of the paper, what is the title of the paper, along with what is it going to what is it all about. So basically the highlights. Now some journals will give you two different terms. One is cover letter and the other one is highlights. In the highlights section, you only need to include what this paper is all about in like, let's say, very precise manner. You just give you write highlights in point wise. Usually that's the norm. And if you write the cover letter to a journal, there you include your title of the research article and what is it all about, but not usually in points, but usually in a short paragraph. So it should be very brief. Then so cover page and title page usually are, kind of synonymous, you could say, unless and until there's a very clear instruction of what to include in a cover page and what to include in a title page. So what happens here is you include the title of the paper, you include the author's names, as in there will be one corresponding author. If you have more than one authors, then you have to include the names of other authors and their details as well, contact details and everything. So usually the term corresponding author should be there. You should mention it in your title page. And let's say it's a solo paper. I'm the solo writer. So even in that case, you have to write your name as corresponding author, because you are the one. Corresponding author is the one who will be corresponding all the communications with the editor, with the journal. Then I will include my abstract. So of course my abstract is just a summary of my entire paper. Now while sending my abstract, while submitting my abstract to a journal, or let's say in a conference, it is very important what kind of words I'm in. I have keywords. So two things here, abstract and keywords. So keywords are the main words that will be there in the in my research, in my paper. That would be the main words in my paper. So I have to make sure that all the keywords that I have mentioned under keyword section should be there in the abstract, and all the highlights that I'm going to add to the paper should be there in the abstract. So the abstract basically talks about what this paper is all about, and maybe you can talk about the method also, just in a brief way, what method you have adopted and what are the findings, but in a very summarized, precise manner, you have to write that. So your abstract should not be too long. Now again, different journals have different word limits for writing the abstract. So the problem is when the word limit is very less, but in any case, that should be, so in that case, I have to keep in mind that the keywords, all the keywords are included in my abstract, and the abstract should be enough to give a clear picture of what is going to be there in my research paper. So writing an abstract is very important. So I do not just copy paste a few sentences from my paper into the abstract. I should not do that. I should refrain from doing that because that doesn't help. So overall, just make sure that you keep the keywords here, and you talk about the highlights here, but maybe in a paraphrased way, because it's better if you do not copy paste the same sentences that you are putting here. They should not be there in your main content. So abstract is there. Usually some journals will ask you to add the abstract and the keywords in the title page itself. So if they're asking it that way, you must follow it that way. And then the manuscript. So when we submit a research paper, we see that there would be something like manuscript with author information, manuscript without author details. So usually the manuscript is without author details. So when I'm saying main content, meaning the manuscript, meaning my paper. So in my paper, I should not include my name there or any of the other authors, which any of my co-authors, if there is more than one author for the paper. So make sure that the manuscript is without any author details, unless there is unless you are asked to do it by the journal. Then there's a reference list. Now I have seen some papers where in fact published papers, while I was looking for some literature, existing literature for a topic, then I have checked the reference lists in those published papers, and I have seen they do not really follow the, what do you call, a correct referencing style. If you mix up everything, especially if you want to publish it in a highly indexed journal, then you have to make sure that you follow the referencing style that was prescribed by the journal, because that also matters. Now while doing the references while writing that part, maybe there are different tools actually to manage your reference list. Now if I'm talking about writing a research paper and adding including references there, then it would not be that long. But if I'm talking about writing my thesis and adding my reference list, it will be long. It will be maybe more than 10 pages usually. So in that case, it is very different for me to manually check if I have, maintained a proper referencing style or not. Usually, if I'm a social science person, if I'm a social science researcher, then I would follow APA maybe. So I would do that. But if I'm a, let's say, from engineering background, maybe I would follow IEEE style. So I need to be familiar with these referencing styles. Sometimes I have noticed that even some journals of social science follow IEEE style, referencing style. So you have to make sure that you are familiar with these. If you have an updated Microsoft Word on your laptop, then it helps because everything is there in it's updated there, so you can easily add that add your reference list. But otherwise you can use tools like Mendeley, because I use Mendeley, and Mendeley is quite useful for me. And there are other tools as well to which will help you out to organize your reference list. Appendix. Now sometimes what happens is, let's say I have too much of data that I want to add to my paper, but due to the, let's say, limitations due to word limit or page limit or space limit, maybe I cannot add everything to my content, to my manuscript. So in that case, if something is extra or something which is maybe which is part of it, but it is not that important, I can prioritize that. So if I do that, I mean, I don't want to put it in the main content, but at the same time I don't want to keep it out. So in that case, maybe I would put it in my appendix section. But if I have to submit it to a journal, usually in the journal they will ask you to submit separate files. Sometimes even for a reference list, they would ask you to submit a separate file. For appendixes, they will ask you to submit a separate file. Even for figures, let's say in terms of writing a quantitative paper, I have lots of figures, lots of data. So in that case also, it would be good. uh, Usually they ask you, the journal will ask you to put your tables or your figures, your data, in a separate file. So that is why it is important for us to go through the guidelines first. And one more thing I just remembered, while submitting, let's say I have written my research paper, now I'm looking for journal to publish it. How do I find that? Now uh, number one, maybe I would look for, like in my case, I would go for maybe Scopus Index journal. So I would go to the Scopus Index journal finder site, and then I will search for, let's say, because I would write mostly in on language and linguistics. So I will look for that particular section, and then I would see, let's say, when I search, I would get a list of the journals that are under that particular section. Now, how do I decide which journal do I choose to submit my article? What do I have to do is I have to check the aims and scope section of that journal, any journal. Uh, my reason for selecting any journal should be by checking if my topic matches with the if my topic matches the aims and scope of that particular journal. Because if you see the title of the journal, maybe you'll find it similar, and then you will send it, but then because you didn't check the aims and scope, so it you might be rejected. So in order to avoid those things, because this is a very minute thing actually, people always do that. They check aims and scope of the journal before submitting there. So you check that and see whether your article, your topic matches their scope or not. If it does, then you send, and then only you start reading their guidelines, and then you prepare your manuscript accordingly. Another thing is, there is also a guideline for styling, for formatting. Now, this one, I have seen a common problem here in some of the research papers that I get for reviewing. I have seen that sometimes, especially in the literature review section, I have seen different fonts for different words or different sentences within the same paragraph. It's kind of embarrassing, and it's a very silly mistake actually, but please do not do that. um, Sometimes what happens is maybe you just copy pasted the information from the article that you have referred to. Let's say I want to quote someone from their study. So when I want to quote someone, quote meaning I can just write the sentence or sentences as they are, as it is. So in that case, maybe I can, what I feel like, it's easier for me to copy paste, because here I am also giving the citation where I'm also referring to the source where I have, got this quotation from. But what happens is, when you copy paste on your Word file, the fonts, because of the settings, because of the default settings, the fonts change, the font types change the moment you add it to your paper. So make sure that you check that as well. And these are very minor things, but then these things can annoy your reviewer a lot. So that's why you have to keep that in mind. And then the labels for the headings for sections and subsections, if you do it very clearly, then it's easier for the reviewer to find out, which section or which heading is about what. So while labeling the headings, the sections, make sure that you write the correct word or term for that particular section or subsection. And also the spacing part, you have to make sure. Sometimes, you see some paragraphs are right indented, some are left indented, and things like that. So please do not do that, because again, as I said, that also kind of annoys the reviewer, because it does not give the impression of a clear, clean manuscript, which is very important. Numberings of pages and sections, again, if it is included in your journal guideline, then you include. If it is not there, you should not. So it is as simple as that. Now, in case of numbering, now let's say I have numbered sections. So section 1.1 is introduction, and 1.2 is background of the study, let's say. So under background of the study, if I have got um, two figures or two tables, then I also number them, because that's the norm. So if it is under 1.2, maybe I would number my figure as figure 1, and then I would write whatever it is. Or let's say I have 2-3 figures under that, then I would write figure 1.1, figure 1.2, figure 1.3, if these are all part of that same section or subsection. Again, there's another norm for positioning those headings or captions for figures and tables. Usually in terms of figure, if I'm adding a figure, the position of the caption should be on top of the figure. Beneath the figure. So let's say figure 1. So I would put the figure first, and then I will add figure 1, and then I have to give a caption. I have to give some words as a name to that, as a label to that figure, so that this is related to what I'm trying to say. Again, if I'm adding a table to it, then I have to write the label of the table first and then add the table. So in case of figures, I mean, this is the usual norm, but again, if some journals are being very specific, then you follow that. But otherwise, the norm is if I'm adding a figure, I'm writing the caption under the figure. And if I'm adding a table, my caption is above that figure, that table. Now, length of paragraphs. Now, this one is also, this also has a common problem, as I would say. Sometimes what happens is under literature review, people will write long paragraphs because they want to include everything there. Or they would write short paragraphs, which is okay. But then if there is no link between paragraph 1 and the adjacent paragraph, then there's a problem. So if I'm adding too many paragraphs or just short paragraphs, which is okay, but if I'm adding them, I need to make sure that my paragraph 1 and paragraph 2 and paragraph 3, all the paragraphs have, all the consecutive paragraphs under that section have link to each other. How do I do that? Paragraph 1, the last sentence, I need to make sure that there is a link between the last sentence of that paragraph and the first sentence of the adjacent paragraph of the next paragraph. If that link is missing, that can also be a reason for the reviewer to raise questions against you, against whatever you have written. So make sure that you do that. And length of paragraphs, if I have written a very long paragraph, then that can be also a problem, because then it can confuse the reviewer what exactly you are trying to say. Because if the paragraph is too long, what happens is in one paragraph, usually I should have one main idea. If I add too many ideas within the same paragraph, then it becomes confusing for the reviewer to figure out what you are actually trying to say. So please do not do that. I also try not to do that. So that's why, I put one idea in one paragraph. But if that idea is, it has sub ideas, so in that case, again, I would, divide them into number of paragraphs. So basically the idea of having paragraphs is just to make sure that my content is very organized, well organized, and it is very easy for my reviewer to read it, to understand it, and to see the connection between one paragraph and the other, and the next adjacent one. So that one is also important. Another point that I have just remembered, while writing paragraphs, especially in the literature review section, sometimes what happens is we add, let's say I have read too many previous studies which are talking about the same thing. So in that case, I would like to add all of them there as citation. I would like to cite them all. But then that's also a problem, because usually, again, it's a norm, I would say. If I add let's say 7-8 citations, in-text citations within the same sentence, then it is a problem, because in that case, I should be able to divide them. I should be able to clearly explain which studies have addressed which aspect of it. So if I add 10 to 15 citations within the same sentence, it is a big no-no. So I should refrain myself from doing that. Academic phrases and jargons. Now, this is important because, these days, especially these days, it is important. We write a lot, and we try to we find a lot of resources, which we do because of internet. It is easier for us now to access journals or other sources, but I need to see what kind of words I'm using to show the connection between the arguments, or between the theories that I have included. So academic phrases and jargons are very important in that case. I forgot to mention here, include here. I have found one book which is I think online. You'll find it. It's free, available. It's called Academic Phrase Bank or Academic Phrase Book. I forgot. you can just Google academic phrase book, then you would find it. It's a PDF and freely available, and it is very helpful. It shows simpler expressions, how to write, as in how to show the connection between arguments, or how do I put my arguments if I review something. What kind of words do I use? Very simpler, easier words, but then their usage is very important. So the appropriateness of the choice of words and the usage of words in terms of writing a research paper is very important. So that's why maybe I would also ask you to look for academic not look for to take note of academic phrases, what kind of words you are going to use and how you are going to use them. So as I said, again, academic phrase book, you can just Google it and you'll find the PDF version. It's very useful. So that's it for tonight. I think I have crossed the time limit, I guess. I'm sorry for that. And this is my email. If you want to contact me, you can always shoot a mail. And that's all for tonight. Thank you so much. And sorry for taking too much time of yours.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your nice deliberation. And this is time of interaction, so I request all the participants to put your query. Please raise your hand so that we can allow you to unmute yourself. This is Nazin Hordapsetia.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Hello, ma'am. Very nice presentation. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
How to register in ResearchGate, ma'am?
Oh, that's easy because it's you just go and have your account, open an account. It's as easy as having an account on Facebook. It's very easy.
Okay.
But
Is
then,
it payable, ma'am?
No. It's free, just like any other social media site. But this is especially for academics, so academicians. So it's good for researchers.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Very nice presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Itika Sohoria, please unmute yourself.
Hello, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am.
Hi. Good evening.
Thank you for the nice presentation. I have two questions, ma'am. I want to ask you in resume of literature review, mainly
Sorry.
what are the things we have to put?
Sorry again. Can you put the question again?
Ma'am, in resume or overview of literature review, mainly what are the things we have to put?
Overview of literature review. As I said, you have to, okay, there are a few things. It actually depends on what kind of research you are pursuing, as in what kind of research paper or topic you're working on. So let's say on your paper, the main focus is on the methods, the research methods. That is your highlight. If that is your highlight, then whatever existing literature you are going to review, your highlight should be on the methods that they have implemented. Or let's say your focus is on a particular aspect which they have also addressed. So in that case, your focus will be on that particular aspect, how they have handled it or how they have addressed it. So for different aspects, you have to look for different things in those existing literature. And I think the best way to do that, because it involves a lot of reading and rereading actually, because sometimes it's not easier for us to identify what exactly I'm looking for. So I would say, I mean, this is what I also personally follow. So let's say I have to write a paper. I will do the literature review. I will read a lot of previous studies, and I actually maintain an Excel sheet. So I would just list down. I would make columns. So one will be the title of title of paper, one will be the year of publication, one will be the research topic, one will be the research, the problem, one will be the research objectives, one will be research questions, and so on and so forth. So the moment I read that paper and then findings, so everything would be there in my columns, different columns. So once I read that paper, whatever under those columns, whichever, whatever content fits in those columns from that particular paper, I would include them there. So let's say I have read 10 papers. So I would include all those points in my Excel sheet. So once I'm done with 10 papers, I would reread my Excel sheet, and then I would try to find, then you would see the connecting dots there. You would see which ones would be relevant, because now you have let's say a synopsis of all those 10 papers. So then it is easier for you. So you just read that Excel sheet, and then you can write from there on. I mean, you can elaborate those points on your paper, whichever is needed for your paper. I mean, that's what I do, and that's what I ask my students to do as well.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, another question is in correlational study.
Sorry?
In correlational study.
Correlational, okay.
Yes, ma'am. Then is there any need of mentioning variables in my paper or in research thesis? Yeah, as both are as both are correlated, as there is no dependent or independent variable, is there any need to mention?
Again, it depends on which direction you are taking your research paper to, because let's say in your paper, maybe the correlations really matter, or maybe only the direct variables matter, or sorry, the dependent variables matter, or maybe only the independent variables matter. So you have to see that from that point of view. I mean, right now I can't just tell you, because you have to read those papers, sorry, the studies, previous studies, or if you want to do that correlational studies, again, the same sort of Excel sheet you can prepare for this one as well. Put all the variables, put all the all sorts of aspects that are addressed by those papers, those studies, and then you can compare, and then you can find out which ones are needed for your paper. So it will be very clearer for you as well as for the reviewer if you include a very clear picture rather than explaining everything in words. Maybe you can prepare a table, that would be even better. As in, prepare the table to include in your paper. That will be even better.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
My question is, can you please mention the steps to write a review article?
Hello.
Review article step, I wouldn't say step, because review article usually is, as I said, 2 or 3 pages long. So in that case, maybe you would just talk about, usually you do not give headings or subheadings when you write a review paper. You just have paragraphs. You do not have headings as such. But your paragraphs have to be very clear, so that, without even having any heading or subheading, the reviewer can easily read your paper and understand what you are going to say in each paragraph. So what you have to include is, first of all, of course, you would include, let's say you're reviewing one article, one paper, one book, let's say. So of course you would start with what book this one is all about, just the basic, just the highlights of that book, the main idea of that book, who has written it, and the author details, I mean, and then when was it published, so the details of publication. And then that would be maybe the first paragraph. Then the second paragraph, you would talk about the main points with elaboration. While elaborating those main points, you have to give evidence from other studies, which also maybe there's a relation between those main points and the other studies. you have to show some sort of review there as well, and then you would your own stance, whether like how do you conclude the paper, the review, with your own argument. So you have to put your argument afterwards, after you write the main points. Then the next paragraph you write maybe your own arguments. But again, when you write your own stance about the book, you also need to give valid rationale, valid reason why you are saying this, what supports your argumentation. You need to write that as well. So for all those, minus the first section, for the other sections you have to read other books or articles or other sources which talk about or which address the same aspects, or maybe you will find those in the references of that book itself. Usually that's what people do. They will go to the reference section. If you are reviewing a book, you go to the reference section of that book and see what kind of references that book has used, and how did the author use those references, in what contexts. So you need to find out those things, identify those things, and then you need to mention, you need to explain those in your paper, in your review paper. So usually the references would be very useful to write a review on a particular book or on a article. So that is why the reference section is very important for any kind of research writer. I hope I answered your question.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Hello, madam. Good evening, madam.
Yeah. Hi, good evening.
Madam, I am Muthu Vijayan, Tamil Nadu. My question:
Okay. Yeah.
What is different between hypothesis and objectives of study, madam? Please clarify,
Hypothesis
madam.
and hypothesis and objectives.
Yes, madam.
Objectives are the ones that those are the goals. Basically, objectives are the goals that you want to attain, you want to
Okay, madam.
achieve by conducting the research. Hypothesis would be the ones that you those are not goals actually, those are your assumptions, that, or your arguments, which can be proven correct or incorrect only at the end of your research. But objectives are the goals that you want to achieve. So the question of getting your arguments correct or not correct will be part of your hypothesis, and goals will be, again, objectives will be which the answers that you are going to attain by doing your research on the problem area. Remember, I told you there's a connection between the research problem, the research objectives, and the research questions. So again, I just need to understand these, the relation between these, among these. So I have the problem statement, I have a problem, research problem, and then I want to explain that research problem. How do I explain that research problem? By elaborating it, by dividing it into questions. So those are my research questions. So basically my research questions are the elaborations of my problem statement. But how do I get the answer to that problem, or to those questions? Those will be my research objectives. So research objectives are the answers to my research questions. Research questions are the elaboration of my problem statement. A hypothesis is something which I assume that if I want to achieve this will happen. This is what I assume. Or my assumption is also based on some previous studies, because I need to have validity for that as well. But my validity for that would be checked or would be proven only at the end of the research. So my hypothesis at the end can be
Your voice is
true or
coming.
false, which is okay. But my research objectives have to be met.
Yes, ma'am. Continue.
That was my answer.
Oh, okay.
Hello. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Ma'am, if I want to write a research
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
research article. So should I research
Madam, your voice is breaking.
Hello.
Ma'am, your voice is breaking. I can't hear you properly.
Okay, I'm repeating.
Hello.
If I want to write a research paper, and
Yeah.
am I audible?
Yes.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Ma'am,
Yes, you are audible.
It is audible now.
Hello,
Hello, madam.
can you hear me?
Hello. Am I audible,
I
madam?
hear too many voices. I don't know which one to answer.
Yes,
Good evening,
Atul
madam.
Gogoi. Yes, Atul
Yes,
Gogoi, please
yes.
proceed.
I have a question.
Yes.
I have a question, madam.
Yes.
How to write a synopsis? I have to include some tentative chapterization. So before writing a synopsis, how to proceed, please, madam?
Synopsis for? I didn't get your question properly. Sorry.
So how to place the things in a synopsis, madam?
Synopsis, as in, are you talking about
Yes, madam.
conducting
About
research and you need a
synopsis.
synopsis?
Yes, madam.
Okay. Again, for synopsis, I guess. Okay, you are talking about PhD.
Yes, madam.
Okay, so for PhD, again, it depends on your institution actually, because every institution has different guidelines for writing synopsis. But if you ask me, where I was teaching and where I'm teaching right now, they don't really require synopsis. So they need a synopsis only for, it's like a proposal, research proposal. So it's not synopsis for them. So are you referring to the same? Is it like you need to write it as a proposal to submit and to get approved?
Yes, madam. Yes, madam.
Okay, so in that case, usually
Sometimes
again,
it is rejected, no?
huh? Sorry?
Sometimes it is rejected synopsis. But why, madam? Some corrections needed. So
Yeah, okay. Usually in a synopsis, if I'm getting it right, it's a synopsis for a PhD, to begin a PhD basically. So in that case, what happens is usually you would write, you know, in my previous organization and my current organization, we ask them to write briefly about 3 things, basically chapter 1, 2, and 3, but not the chapters as such, but you have to mention things like what is your topic in the synopsis, and what is the problem statement. You need to mention them clearly. What is your, or what are your proposed research objectives and questions, and you need to write a brief account of literature review, and then the research methods that you want to adopt. So usually these things are included in a synopsis. I'm not sure if the same format is applied here. So in any case, these are the things that you need to mention there. But since, let's say, I want to to pursue my PhD, and then I need to write a synopsis or let's say a proposal for that. So I would focus mainly on literature review, because that's what will be my base for everything. Because my research methods, I'm not so sure about if I'm going to use them or not, because I haven't started my research, or even my research objectives and questions, or even problem statement, or not problem statement, maybe research objectives and questions. Right now, I'm just putting them, but I might change depending on how my research, which direction does it go. But my focus, that's why, should be on the literature review. I need to do an extensive literature review, even to put in the synopsis, because whatever points I mentioned there, they have to be well supported. If that support is not there, if strong evidence is not there, then my synopsis is not going to be approved. So I need to focus mainly on my literature review.
Hello.
So whatever literature review you add, whatever literature you add, make sure that you add all the valid ones, all the relevant ones that address the topic or around the topic. So please focus on that.
Hello, ma'am.
Thank you,
Hi.
madam, for your nice deliberation. And this is a very fruitful session, and very interestingly, interaction is going on. But due to time constraint, we are unable to continue this program. So I apologize for that. That we are unable to continue. Thank you, madam, once again. For
Thank you so much.
accepting
Thank you
our
so much.
invitation and giving your valuable time and sharing your knowledge and experiences and all these things regarding research and also how to prepare a research article. It is really enlightening and enriching, I think, and I believe that all the participants have benefited from your deliberation. And thank you once again. I hope that we will meet again in another future discourses. And I also request madam to put your concluding remarks, please.
Thank you so much. It actually has been a pleasure to me, actually, to have interacted with all of you for the previous sessions as well as this session. So I really enjoyed, and I liked the way I got the opportunity to share whatever I have experienced or whatever I am learning. So it is a really fruitful session for me as well, experience for me as well. So thank you everyone for that. And in any case of any sort of communication or discussion, I have always included my email address in my slides. So in case of any queries or any kind of discussion, everyone is welcome to just contact me through my email. And I really enjoyed it, and I hope to have more such sessions in future as well. So good night to everyone. Thank you.
Good night, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Good night.
Good night.
So that's all for today, and respected participants. And now I officially declare that this session is ended. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.